You're listening to The Voice of Reason with Mark Reed and Ted Durden, only on LA Talk Radio.
Good evening, and welcome to another edition of The Voice of Reason. My name is Ted Durden, and I'm a Southern Democrat.
And my name is Mark Reed, a West Coast Republican.
And together we are The Voice of Reason. For those of you tuning into the show for the very first time, this is a politically motivated podcast where civil discourse is the order of the day. Where Mark and I discover we have more things that unite us than we do that divide us. And having said that, as I always do, I toss the ball over to my co-host, Mark Reed.
Absolutely. This is my time to do a monologue. It's nice to be back in the studio after last week's breather, and thank you for that generous plug that you gave me last week. Like I said, I'm gonna take that, I'm gonna cut it, and I'm gonna paste it everywhere. So be ready.
Hey, I stand by my words.
But you know, you're not the only Democrat that is coming out for me. Actually, on the Jennifer and Brian, the morning answer show on 870. AM radio, both Brian, the Democrat, and Jennifer has come out for the first time and endorsed me. So this is the universal message that I've been bringing across for quite some time, and that is that we need representation that represents the entire district, not the party.
Right.
We've watched the party representation, and it's destroying our country. And it's going to lead me into, you've heard me talk about, and we've all heard President Trump talk about the corrupt press. The liars and all of this stuff in the press. But, you know, there is a point to it, because I have testified on 4 different occasions in front of the Federal Communications Commission in regards to vertical integration and consolidation. And that means there's about 8 major corporations in the entire world that own 85% of everything we see, read, and hear. So yesterday, I ended up getting a notification of an article that was written by the Daily News about the races, the congressional races in Los Angeles County, and it starts it off with a very biased, part, saying that all of the incumbents in Los Angeles County have an edge over all of their competitors because of the Trump frenzy stuff, right? I'm paraphrasing their headliner. But, I'm reading the article, and all of the districts are out of numerical order. Most of the candidates have very small one-sentence blurbs, like in the 25th District, Mike Garcia, who was on our show. He said he's just a retired Air Force veteran and a Raytheon executive. And so I'm going through the list, and I get down to mine. And you tell me if you think there's a little bias involved in this, Ted, because I'll tell you what I wrote to the Daily News. Ryan. I'll look up his name here in a second, though. But he writes in District 30, once again, the incumbent Democrat has been an intense Trump critic. Representative Brad Sherman was among the earliest drafters of the impeachment articles, placating to the liberal left in the district, right? Then it dives right into this, and this is the good one. Republican businessman Mark S. Reed has taken issue with that, as well as touting the right to bear arms and a tighter border security. A trio of San Fernando Valley Democrats are also challenging Sherman. Businessman Courtney C.J. Barina, and aviator Raji Rab, and neighborhood councilman Brian T. Carroll. You tell me if you're sitting on the other side. Now you've listened to me talk. Are those my top 3 priorities?
No, they're not.
Not even close.
No,
in fact,
actually,
one of my consultants got mad at me because I was reaming Trump's delivery and personality more than you. You were defending him, and I was the one reaming him. And he was like, "Why are you so tough on him?" I said, "Because I really don't like the way he delivers things. His just his demeanor,
his personality.
His personality." And so it's not I don't take issue with the impeachment process. I take issue with the fact that I was against Clinton's impeachment, believe it or not, because impeachment is one of the toughest and most consequential actions that Congress and the Senate can take. And I honestly, myself personally, believe that a real crime that affects this country has to take place.
Agreed.
And as Nadler, as Pelosi, as Schiff, as every other Democrat in there, even when Clinton was being impeached, they were saying that the Republicans had such a hatred for President Clinton that they couldn't see straight, and this was just outrageous, and this needs to be a bipartisan impeachment and everything else, and we need to have a bipartisan vote. And they completely flipped the script this time. So when I look at an impeachment process, I say, look, it has to be a serious enough crime that really jeopardizes this country. Otherwise, you go to a censure. You just say, you know what, you really were bad, put the censure through, and you know what, in the next election, we're going to vote you out. And that's it. So for the Daily News to write this up the way they did, this is, to my opinion, is obviously a young journalist that's probably leaning to the left and just wrote down 3 talking points that you hear the average talking points of the Republican.
Right.
They don't like the impeachment. They take issue with the impeachment. They want gun rights, gun law, not gun laws, but gun rights, the Second Amendment rights.
Correct.
And they want, border security. Well, I've never really discussed those things.
No, you haven't. And as soon as you're done, I'm going to weigh in on a couple of things about what you just read.
Go right ahead. I'm
Okay.
ready. I'm ready for your input on this because,
Okay.
and then I'm going to read you what I wrote this guy.
Okay. Here's the thing. I've had the pleasure of knowing Mark for almost a year now, and Mark, as I indicated on the last show when I was running solo, because Mark has some speaking engagements, Mark is not afraid to buck the system. Mark is extremely pragmatic. And I look at Mark as a turning point for this district. The fact that Brad Sherman supported impeachment, and again, I'm a Democrat, that's not a selling point to me. It isn't, because I think the impeachment process was a waste of time. Now, do I believe that Congress had a responsibility, or the House had a responsibility to investigate it because they felt that they had done something wrong? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, I knew it was going to be a complete waste of time. It really and truly was. The obstruction of Congress, there's no such a thing. It was something that they made up. So the fact that they wanted to use that as a selling point for Brad Sherman, I think, number one, is a mistake. Number two, your concerns cuts across the entire spectrum. It's not a Republican issue. It's not a Democratic issue. It's a community issue.
That's right.
And these are the sort of things that you address as far as, homelessness, the issue as far as the mentally ill. There are a lot of causes that you champion that cut across all political divides. And so for the Daily News to weigh in as if you have the typical Republican talking points is, number one, is a gross misrepresentation. And it simply further demonstrates that they did not even at least take the time to learn who you are. I've had the pleasure of sitting on this podcast beside you, and as I often say at the beginning of the show, we have a lot more things we have in common than we do that are different.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that gets lost. That's why on the podcast, I suggested, and it seemed like almost like Jennifer and Brian were listening, you need to have a look. Regardless of your political affiliation, your party affiliation, you deserve a look from Republicans, Democrats, as well as independents. Because, in my opinion, I think Brad Sherman has done a disservice to this district. Everything that he does is for his own personal and political gain without any consideration to the community at large. For him to go down to the border, buying into the media that's portraying just about those immigrants, and again, I'm not trying to minimize the tragedy that they experience, but the media fails to take a look at what you and I have been doing as far as the drugs that are coming across the border and the impact it has with America at large, especially the Midwest, and in North Dakota, South Dakota,
yep,
and states like that. So I think that article, even that little short blurb, it does a disservice to the community because it is not an accurate or fair representation of the man that you are.
Well,
so
even on my website, Ted, I think you probably have gone to my website and looked at it, but if that reporter would have taken the moment, I have a very intensive, how would you say, thought out website that puts my positions on there, whether you like them or dislike them.
Right.
I have a capital gains position, the reconfiguration of taxes. I have the border issues, on it. I actually have an article on there that makes people think about the Second Amendment. Is it relevant today or not? Is it relevant or not?
Right.
Is Judge Scalia's his view and point and his interpretation of it as an individual right to bear arms? I put that out there as a question. I actually got Republicans coming after me saying, "You're really taking a bold position." I said, "Well, we need to think about these things." I put it there to provoke thought.
Right.
I do believe that each individual has a right to protect themselves. Okay, and this is what the Second Amendment is about. But
absolutely.
when you look at the Second Amendment, what is it? But that's not one of my big points. I don't really talk about that.
No.
I really don't. And I talk about our border security issues because it's not immigration. I am all for legal immigration.
So am I.
I went down to the border when the press was misrepresenting what was going on with the caravans. I interviewed the mayor of Tijuana. I interviewed people in the caravans. I subjected myself to health risk because it was filthy squalor that they were living in, this huge caravan. But then they come to find out that just prior to that caravan coming from Honduras in Nicaragua, there was a caravan of 18,000 Haitians that came through the border, and you didn't hear one press article about it, not one. Just prior to that, the big one that they were talking about.
I remember that. Yeah.
At the war, they were housing them at the Juarez, and they tried to run the border again. But I sent an email to this Ryan Carter over at the Daily News, and this was my reply. I said, "Mr. Ryan Carter, please explain how you came to the conclusion that I have taken issue with Sherman's filing of the articles of impeachment, the touting of the right to bear arms and tighter border security as the top 3 issues in my campaign. On my website, it is clear my top issues that include solutions offered are homeless, mental illness, drug addiction, judicial and prison reforms. On my policy page, I have pieces written up about capital gains, Supreme Court judges, an argument against the Second Amendment, and the homeless industrial complex, and the complete lack of bottom-up representation in the district. Said, help me understand the possible appearance of a biased approach to the reporting of this race. I'm truly curious how you came to your conclusions when my website and all my speeches, including my podcast, paint a completely different picture."
Well, because you know what they're doing is, the answer to that is very easy. What they're trying to do is they're trying to paint you with a broad brush.
Yeah.
They're trying to cast you in the same light as some extreme Republicans are. And you're anything but that. You're anything but that. But they want to try to paint you with this broad brush in order to discourage or dissuade people from giving you the look that you deserve and possibly voting for you. And again, that does a disservice to the community at large. It's something that you and I have talked about before. I miss responsible journalism.
So I miss Tom Brokaw, and
that's the way it is. I mean, Walter Cronkite. I mean,
yes.
just a journalistic icon. He simply reported the news. There was no opinion. There was no trying to sway the reader or the listener or the viewer to his point of view, his perspective. He simply presented the news, and you make your determination. That's what you do. And I miss that because it seems like nowadays the news has become more entertainment, more like infotainment than just information, just the dissemination of information. And I miss the old days. I really, truly do in that regard.
Well, that's what the theme of my testimonies in front of the FCC going back 20 years, 20 to 15 years ago. And I'm going to look it up real fast when I turn it back over to you to talk a bit. And that is that we have fallen into a uniformity of thought that is being pushed by the narratives of the press. And this narrative that they're pushing is one side against the other, and that's all they care about. When in truth and reality, that swath in middle America, that 80% that's in the center lines, before you get to the extreme right and to the extreme left, that swath in the middle, that 80%, really have a bipartisan approach and pragmatic approach to everything out there, because they know and realize that the city government, the county government, the state government, and the federal government affects everybody equally. It doesn't just affect one side or the other. It affects everybody equally, positive or negative. It doesn't matter which way it goes. It only matters on policy. So I had an interesting phone call the other morning from a Democrat, and she was filling out her ballot. And it was obvious she was a Democrat, because she was really grilling me on subject matters, the homeless situation, the drugs, the mental health, HUD reform. She even went into the impeachment process, and I told her exactly what I felt about it, as I've expressed even in this conversation. And then she asked me about integrity. She goes, are you a man of integrity? And I had to sit back, because that's not an easy question. Anybody, even a person without integrity, say, sure, I'm a man of integrity, right? And so I fell back, and I answered it exactly this way. I said, this is a values election. I said, not Joe Biden's description of values, but this is a real values election of what really matters at the kitchen table. What's happening in everybody's homes. Said, I'm not just preaching my values. I've lived my values my entire life. I was given the example by my mother and father, who lived to 92 and 94. They celebrated their 72nd wedding anniversary before they passed away. My father died 11 months after my mom. My mom died the day after their 72nd wedding anniversary. So they gave me that example. But I lived mine because of that example. I met my wife when I was 11. I gave her a promise ring to her at 16 years old. We married at 21. We have 3 adult children. We have 10 grandchildren now, and 1 on the way, the 11th one on the way. And so I've lived it. And it doesn't mean that I'm better than somebody else, because I've made my mistakes. I'm an imperfect person. I've made my mistakes in life. I've made my mistakes in my marriage. But I am trying to live those ideals of values that all of us strive to.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't make me better or less than anybody. It's just, when I say that this is a values election, I mean exactly what Rabbi Mentz said, that, we're supposed to go out and make a family. I went out, I made a family. I've carried the load on my own back. I haven't burdened somebody else with my load. I have been as good of a possible man to my wife as I possibly could be. I've been as good as a father that I possibly could to my children, and I'm trying to be as good a grandfather as I can for my grandchildren. And that's what we all strive to do. That is a purpose-led life to values and happiness, because money comes and goes.
It does.
Prestige comes and goes. But our family, our community stays forever. What do we give back to our community? This is what these elections are always about. It's turned into Republican and Democrat, as if you're better than me or I'm better than you. That's a crock of bullpucky.
It is.
Period.
It is.
You're not better than me. I'm not better than you. You've got different ideas. I've got different ideas. Okay, let's talk about them. Let's see how we come up with a great idea.
Right. I mean, it's like I've always said, a problem doesn't have a political affiliation, nor does a solution. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle it comes from. And I'm going to I'll make one more comment about the media. The media is upset about Trump, or doesn't like Trump, because he competes with them at their level. And this is what I mean by that. The media nowadays wants to control the narrative. Trump wants to control the narrative. So he plays the same game that they does. He controls the narrative. Whether you agree with him or not, whether he exaggerates facts or not, whether he makes up facts or not, he controls the narrative. He has always done that. He did that in his business, and now he's doing it in government. He's doing it as our sitting president. And that frustrates the hell out of the media because they cannot control the narrative. He competes with them at that level. But going back to what you just said, it is all about values. Because when I listen to the Democratic candidates, the majority of what I hear, from Klobuchar to Biden to Warren to Buttigieg to Sanders, I can be Trump. I could give a rat's ass. What I care about is, what are you going to do when you get into that White House that is going to impact my life in a positive manner? That is going to impact
make it better.
Right, and that's all I care about. I don't care about who's going to, and I'm not trying to minimize. I think it's important that we come together as a nation because there's a lot of divisiveness going on both sides of the aisle, and I think that's important. But I'm looking for the candidate to cast my vote for someone who is going to exemplify the ideals that we all hold dear. As
Americans, not as a party affiliate.
I agree with you, and that's where I'm at. So to those Democratic candidates, if you see this, if you catch at least this snippet of this podcast, stop talking about beating Trump and just tell me what difference you're going to make when you sit in that seat of power. That's all I care about.
Well, I have a better message, and that is that the society needs to stop acting like lemmings on both sides of the aisle.
Very true.
And that is look through that hypocritical BS that's being handed to you by both sides of the aisle to get elected. I mean, come on. Do you honestly think that they can forgive all college tuitions? And is it even fair? And think about it. Just think about it for a minute. You have a bunch of individuals that did not sign up for college debt. You have a bunch of individuals that have gone out and worked 2 jobs. Even the student worked a little bit to pay their college debt.
Right.
And then you have a group of individuals that decided, I'm going to take this class. You're never going to get employed in it, and you're going to make everybody else pay for that?
Right. And it's almost like, I'm sorry. It's almost like immigration. I mean, really, it's almost like immigration. I mean, it really is, because it's like, that's why you have the legal immigrants. A lot of them don't care for the illegal immigrants because they're like, we did it the right way. Yeah. And all of a sudden, you want to come here illegally and enjoy the same rights that we sweated, that we waited years for, that we did it the right way. We went through all the governmental procedures. We did everything. And all of a sudden, you want to come across illegally and you want to get the same benefits that we do. They have a problem with that. And so it's the same thing with college loans. Those people who work 2 and 3 jobs in order to pay off their loans, those who work 2 and 3 jobs so as not to have a loan. And all of a sudden, those who took a loan like underwater basket weaving just to take a class, and all of a sudden your loan is forgiven.
Well, you know why a lot of these students, some of them take these BS classes out there is because they're actually given a stipend. They're given per diem while they're going to college. And they know they're never going to utilize it, and they also know they're never going to pay the loan either. See, I found the FCC testimony, and I did, and this goes back to I testified under Commissioners Michael Copps and Jonathan Adelson, and actually Michael Copps wrote me a letter back, and he said, what great leadership, don't give up the work, because they saw back then that the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, and our media was falling apart. So this is the testimony that I gave you. You're given a 2-minute testimony period.
Okay.
All right, so here goes. Control information and you control the nation. That was the theme of my testimony before the FCC several years ago when I spoke on behalf of the Screen Actors Guild. More than ever, it's my theme today, because in the years since then, fewer and fewer people are controlling more and more of America's media. And we rely on America's media as our source of diverse information. But with fewer people now controlling our media, that diversity is being lost. not racial diversity, but the kind of diversity that is key to American survival, the diversity of ideas. With fewer people now controlling more media, we've been denied diverse information, herded into uniformity, the uniformity of thought that is parent to tyranny. We ask the FCC to help us prevent that tyranny of uniform thought. No time to waste. We need help now. Folks, in a few days, it will again be September 11th. We are still under attack. Our borders are weak, our people are confused, and the information we get is controlled, opinionated, and sanitized. If we are to survive, we must have balanced information so we can think about it, so we can debate it in dissent. I know what I'm talking about. I'm an American Indian, descendant of an ignored people, and I'm a proud American citizen. What was once Indian country is now our American nation, which, like every other nation on earth, is a nation of immigrants. But our America is unique because it is founded on diverse ideas, as much as diverse races. Without diversity of ideas based on open information, we American citizens will certainly lose our liberty. Control information, and you control the nation. It's happening now, and it must be stopped. You imagine I read that testimony. That'd be 16 years ago.
And it's still relevant today.
Yes, but I read a testimony prior to that. That was the third testimony in front of the FCC. I read two of them prior to that, 2 years prior and 2 years prior to that one, because this one was done in L.A. I did one in South Dakota, and I did another one in I believe it's Minneapolis. And each one of them was the same thing because I saw the policies. This is why I've always said my theme has never been party politics.
Right.
It's always been policy, 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 policy. If you can't read the policy and understand the ripple and unintended consequences of that policy, you shouldn't be in a position of leadership.
Agreed.
So when you have news reporters like this Ryan Carter over at the Daily News writing up a BS, half-assed written article, throwing a slant in there, knowing that their readers are going to read it like, oh my God, he's a rotten Republican. I've got to vote against him. I've got to get out. What a disservice to the community, because what they're leaving in office is a person who's ignored the community for over 15 years. And has created the problems that we see today, including affordable housing, because affordable housing is to deal with the policies and the regulations that the state of California has implemented, creating it nearly impossible to build new tract houses, has created nearly impossible for individuals with little means to get HUD loans for housing. It's been near impossible to even Section 8 vouchers as well, because they have destroyed the process and they have not corrected it out. They've been sitting on their backsides collecting $180,000 a year and doing absolutely nothing except for playing this partisan bullshit politics. And excuse the French out there, but I can get going. But that's what it is. That is actually exactly what it is. It's partisan BS at its height.
And I tell you what, that article makes me think of a cliche where it says, a little knowledge is a dangerous thing. And normally that means that somebody who has a little knowledge, often because they don't know what they're doing, they can wreak havoc. In this situation right here, it's the same thing, because the dissemination of very little information about you and other candidates, preying upon those readers, no offense, ignorant, who don't know anything about you, giving them as little information as possible, because the average reader of the Daily News, that when they look at this candidate list, they're not going to go to your website and really find out who you are.
No.
They're going to make their mind up based on that little snapshot, that slant that the Daily News has given you along with the other candidates. That's what they're doing. And that's a dangerous thing.
Yes.
Because they're not fully informed. And when you act on a lack of information, you do more harm than good.
Remember, that was the theme, the beginning of the what do you call it, segment that we did, the show that we did with Rabbi Mintz, and that was it started off with ignorance. Ignorance is not knowing about a particular subject, and an ignorant individual is a very dangerous individual.
Absolutely.
When our news reporters, are reporting on things, if they're, how would you say, more ignorant than the people that they are actually reporting to, that creates a very dangerous atmosphere of electing the wrong people.
It does.
Because they should have the wherewithal to at least look up a little information and find out about that, rather than canning it all and just throwing out an opinion of a Republican. Oh, he just cares about, the impeachment. He's against the impeachment. Oh, he wants everybody to have guns. He sounds like, I hate to tell you what the Don Lemon was, making the jokes about the Republicans being, it's like, and it's not, but it's not, it's the worst part. It's not even funny, because that's why I took the time over a 5-year period to testify in front of the FCC, because our news media is the public CIA to go out and get information for us so we can go to work 50, 60 hours a week and pay our bills, take care of our families. We watch a little news, we get the facts.
And again, that's the way it used to be. I remember that there was a movie that was done, critical acclaim, called The Post. It was about the Washington Post. And it was about the investigation that was done and information that came to light about the Vietnam War, where the United States government was misleading the public about what was going on. See, to me, that's responsible journalism. But all they did was report the facts. They just reported the information. They didn't try to slander one way or the other.
Nope.
They simply reported the information. And it seems like across the board, that's what the news media is missing now. It's now more about personality than it is about the dissemination of just facts and information. It makes me think about that line from Dragnet, just the facts. Just the facts.
Yeah.
But they don't do that so much anymore.
Okay, I got you. Well, I wanted to get to it so I can see comments that are coming in on the show. We're going to go ahead and pay our bills. Before we pay our bills, we were going to have a taped interview with Tim Foley, the CEO and founder of Arizona Border Recon, as the second episode to our southern border, The Real Deal. But unfortunately, we had a problem with downloading the taped interview. This is what happens with tech, and I don't understand tech enough to fix it myself. Otherwise, I might have had it fixed. But next week will be that show as well, and that's one that you don't want to miss. This is, it'll be with the Arizona Border Recon, Tim Foley. Right now, we're going to go ahead and pay our bills and play our 2 ads. I hope they're watching in there. Sam, if you can play our 2 ads, please. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ted Durden, and I want to take a moment to talk to you about trust, and I trust churchandlaw.com. When it comes to workers' compensation and employment law, you can trust churchandlaw.com. If you ever need legal advice you can rely on, it's churchandlaw.com. Black and white, no gray, churchandlaw.com. 818-230-3110. churchandlaw.com, a law firm you can trust and count on.
Welcome back to the Voice of Reason with Ted Durden and Mark Reed. We're kind of freewheeling this evening because we had a planned episode of a taped interview with Tim Foley with the Arizona Border Recon, the second in our sequel of the Southern Border, The Real Deal. And so we're just kind of really getting to a nice conversation of some heated moments here, not at each other though, just of the, how would you say, the garbage that's in the process, that both of us realize that it really does affect everybody.
No, it really and truly does. I mean, responsible journalism has always been the cornerstone of our country. It always has been. There's investigative reporters have been the backbone of it, where you uncover corruption, wrongdoings, all sorts of things. But for it to have gone from responsible journalism to more about personalities, I think does a disservice to us all. It really and truly does. You know, the media should not be liberal. The media should not be conservative. The media should just be the media, just reporting the information, just the facts, and letting the consumer, letting the viewing audience, the reading audience, the listening audience, draw their own conclusion without trying to sway. That's what it should be doing. But unfortunately, that isn't what's happening nowadays. It really and truly
It's
isn't.
really not. Myra has joined watching the show here. I just saw her pop up on the feed here. It kind of gets into this whole debacle that the Democrat leadership is pulling off on us, and the media is perpetuating the falsities of this. You're in the courtroom, so you know this stuff. Mm-hmm. And that is, it's come out that President Trump, the debacle is that Roger Stone is being recommended a lighter sentence than 7 to 8 years, or 7 to 9 years. 7 to 9 years, right. Right. And, murderers, probably get less than that, second degree murder and stuff. And, stronger offenses. Well, he misled Congress because of the twists and lies and everything and the deceit that was going on. And so it's like to throw him into prison for 7 to 9 years. The Justice Department, not President Trump, he didn't step into it. He said, look, I don't know, I didn't recommend anything. This is all the Justice Department. William Barr came out and said the same thing. He goes, no, I didn't do it. The attorneys on the case went into the courtroom and said they're not standing firm on it. But the truth of the matter is the attorneys, President Trump, William Barr does not sentence Roger Stone. The judge does.
No, but and you're right. But here's the problem that I have with what happened, though.
Okay.
My problem is this. Now, Trump was correct. He did not have a direct conversation with the DOJ. He did not. But I'm sorry, he tweeted it out, and you can't minimize the impact or the effect that would have about what he does, because we all know that Trump prizes loyalty above anything else, and Roger Stone had always been a staunch ally. Now, what I found out, or what I heard, though, is William Barr did an interview, and William Barr admitted he had already spoken with his staff about doing a sentencing reduction recommendation to the judge. The fact that Trump put it out there before he made it public, it created a problem for him. I think it was inappropriate for Trump to say what he did on a pending case. He shouldn't have done that. But it appears that William Barr was going to do that anyway.
Yeah, but the over-prosecution and the over-zealot judge sitting on the case wanting to give that higher end for such a minor case, for a minor infraction of what he did. Granted, he's going to suffer. He's already suffering. He's been in jail. Mm-hmm. He's losing millions of dollars, and he's going to be incarcerated for a certain amount of time. But 7 to 9 years?
Well, I look at it like this.
Yeah.
I mean, and even when Mike was on the show,
right?
Not Mike. When Troy was on the show,
right?
And he was talking about the inequities when it comes to sentencing,
right?
And that cuts across all the board. So,
right.
in that sense, I'll be honest with you, I don't feel sorry for him in that sense, because I've seen too much injustice in general about people that were given heavy sentences that didn't deserve it, about people. Suspects that were coerced, and possibly innocents that were coerced into plea deals because they feared getting a greater sentence had they gone to trial. So I don't feel. I don't feel.
Isn't that all part of the bullying from the prosecutors, whether it's the city attorney or the DA's office? They'll come in and they'll over prosecute a case, knowing that they're going to plea it down, and the person sitting in prison. This is why the bail reduction, how would you say, bills that have gone through to get rid of all bail, because it unequally punishes people without money or without means, because now they have to sit in jail the entire time. I know the argument you're going to give me, because I'm against that as well.
Because
because you can get bail reduction if you're a person of no means, and I said this before in the argument against that of getting rid of all bail. Okay, because bail should be there for those who have already proven that they're not going to show up. Bail should be there for those of violent crimes. Bail should be there for a person who is not a resident or has an anchor in the ground in the community. However, I do know that when you get arrested for something, for whatever size of bail, the minor, because they're talking about minor ones, $25,000, $50,000, $75,000 bails. If you are a person, you got busted for, you did something stupid, let's say you decided to do drugs, you went out and had some cocaine on you or whatever, and you got busted, $75,000 bail. You can go to a bail hearing judge while you're sitting in the holding cell. They will listen to you, and he says, okay, you check off all the boxes. Do you live here? Do you live there? And you have to give a referral. They call the referral number up. They verify all the information. If you own a house, or you not own it, if you're even renting in the community, you have a job in the community, you've been there for a long time, you've never not shown up for something, they will let you out on your own recognizance. Right. So that was a failed argument to me.
It was.
People that do not respect the judicial system, they're the ones that say, look, I'm not going to spend an additional $25,000 to go find your butt because you didn't show up to court. Because that's what it's going to cost. They're going to have to get the sheriff's department out there. They're going to have to get the cops. They got to go out there and arrest you. You think that's free? No, we're paying for it. So to hold them in custody while their case wiggles through the system, that's on them.
No, and I agree. And even going back to Roger Stone, do I believe that the recommendation of 7 to 9 years, which is the max that he could receive, was it political? Sure it was, because they wanted to demonstrate that they were not going to be easy on Roger Stone because he was an ally of Trump. So I believe that they had to do that. Do I believe that the judge was going to impose a harsher sentence? I don't think the judge would have, because a judge is not obligated to abide by a sentencing recommendation.
No,
he has a wide swath, so he could do whatever he was going to do. I regret.
Well, he has a wide swath based on parameters given based on the crimes that he's being convicted of.
Right.
So they have the low end and the upper end.
Correct.
The upper end was the 7 to 9. I don't know what the lower end was.
If I recall, I think it was 3 to 5.
3 to 5.
3 to 5.
So all the Justice Department did was come out and say, look, it's not that big of a deal. We were recommending a lower end on it, but it's still up to the judge. The judge can literally go from 3 to 9.
No, he could, absolutely. Okay. He or she. Yeah,
he or she. I think it's a guy.
Is it a guy? Okay.
Yeah,
so. He could.
Yeah, so they're just recommendations. It's a wish list in a sense. What are they doing? And this is true in every courtroom.
Absolutely.
Every courtroom.
Absolutely.
Even with mitigation of a settlement. They say, well, we're asking for $10 million. The judge looks at you and says, well, I don't think it's worth 10. I'm going to give you 5. The audacity of the Democrats requesting William Barr to step down, and the audacity of them saying, well, we can impeach William Barr now. What they hooked on impeachment now?
I just wish they would.
The Democrat leadership, it's like they're driving this country over the edge. No different than I honestly believe the Democrat leadership in California is driving the state of California up and over the edge into insolvency because of what they're doing.
Well, yeah, I didn't. I'm a Democrat, and I didn't vote for Gavin Newsom. That's the first time in any political race I've ever voted Republican, because I could not stomach giving my vote to that man. I disagree when you said the Democrats are taking us over the edge. Are they doing damage? Yeah, they're doing damage. I don't agree with what.
It's not Democrats. Remember, it's not the Democrats. The party members.
I know you're talking about the leadership.
I'm talking about the leadership of the Democratic Party. And that's what's driving it over. They, as I've said before, in America, even in the state of California, you do have this swath of registered voters. And I say it's 80% of all the people. But you have 10% on the far right, you have 10% on the far left. They're the ones in control right now. This is why I say the swath in the middle has got to stop, put their party loyalties down, look at the candidate and say, who's going to best represent my interest in this district? Who's going to best represent my values? Who's best fit to bring the bacon home to my district and protect my interest and rights?
And I agree with you 100%. I really and truly do. That to me, it is as much as again, I'm a Southern Democrat. It has to be about, like you said, who represents my values, who represents my interests, and that's who you should vote for, really and truly. And I go back to what I
don't have the corner on all the right values either.
No.
Neither do you.
No.
It's a community coming together and finding out what are the best values for the entire community. Then you have the right to go home based on your Fourth Amendment to live the life the way you want to live it.
Yeah, but
you have your civil rights, and that's it.
But it still has to be based upon cogent and relevant information. It will always come down to that. Any vote that you cast has got to be knowledge based.
Absolutely.
Because if a vote is cast in ignorance, it is a wasted vote, and then more often than not, it will do more harm and will do more damage than good. It's no different than with some of the things they put on the ballot regarding extra money, extra funding, and so forth and so on. You have to become knowledgeable. These books that are sent out, what's going to be on the ballot, read the information, become informed about it, become knowledgeable about it before you cast your vote. Take a hard look at all of the candidates. This man sitting here to my left, I think is a great candidate. He's a Republican. I'm a Democrat. But again, I like what he has to say. We may not agree with. I
appreciate that.
We may not agree all the time. We may not agree, but that's what America is all about. That's what this show is all about. It's about civil discourse. It's about having a civil disagreement. Like I said, and a value, an ideal, a moral, a problem, a solution has no political affiliation. Vote for the person that you feel best represents your values, who will do what they believe needs to be done for the good of the community. Not about lining their pockets, lining their purses, taking care of doing political favors, exercising nepotism. Vote for the person that you think is going to represent your values, period. But just be informed. That's all I ask.
Very well said. Let's go to our last ad to pay our bills here.
All right.
My erstwhile opponent says I don't accept debate invitations. I accept the League of Women Voters invitation.
The League of Women Voters LA chapter was the one who invited him to the 5 debates with the battered women's organization, with a synagogue, 2 churches, and the American Legion. And he turned down them all flat with the League of Women Voters. Welcome back to the final segment of the Voice of Reason. And, Ted, I knew the day that I met you, and so did my rabbi. When he met you for the first time, he said, look, I looked into this man's eyes, and I saw a man I can trust, to you. And I felt the same way when the first day that I met you as well. And our mutual friend used to say, oh, you two go get a room. And it's like, no, right. Sorry. Wrong flavor.
Okay, right. Yeah, okay. I don't like it that much.
Wrong gender. I'm not into binary genders here. No, but I grew up in a family of 11, and so we used to sit around the dining room table. And we would have philosophical conversations to 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And you talk about, and we were all, Navy brats basically, and military family, and we didn't agree, we're all registered Republicans, but hell, we had 22 different opinions.
There you go.
At least 2 each, right? And they were hiding the third one in the background, so there's really 33 of them, right? Mm-hmm. So, but this is what has been lost in society today because our generations before us were too afraid to talk about the hard subjects.
Right, yeah.
Sex, politics, and religion. Mm-hmm. So we have created a generation of kids now that it's impossible for them to sit down. It's near impossible for them to sit down and have a civil conversation about the hard subjects. And it's a shame because it's destroying communities. It's destroying the state. It's destroying the country. I had a guy, going after me constantly, saying I was a bigot, I was a racist, I was a homophobe, I was an anti-Semite, and he can't even admit after watching the interview with the rabbi.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really?
He can't even admit after watching our shows. It's a black, an African American, an American Indian, then a rabbi, a Jew sitting at the same table.
Sounds like a joke.
All getting along. Yeah, they walked into a bar.
Okay. Okay.
He can't even admit that this Republican. Or not all Republicans, not all human beings, just because they differ from you, are a bigot, a racist, a homophobe, or an anti-Semite. And it's like the ignorance involved is mind-boggling at times. It's really mind-boggling.
It really and truly is.
I'm going to mention this because Ted and I, we had Sandy Everett and Victoria Estrada on our show to talk about the sex, health, HIV prevention, gender assignment curriculum falls under the anti-bullying curriculum mandated by the state law in the state of California and nationwide as well under the anti-bullying laws. Mm-hmm. And we're going to be co-hosting a town hall meeting on the 29th at the Houses of Light Church in Northridge on Londelius Street, and there's going to be a school board trustee on there, Sandy Everett that was here as well. There's going to be an attorney from the Justice Institute, and we're working on getting a psychologist on that panel as well. Right. And we're going to lay it out completely. We're going to live stream it here. Mm-hmm. We're going to show everybody the facts, because when I put that episode out, you don't follow it as much as I do. I follow all the feedback. People were saying, well, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I was taught that stuff, and when I was in school, I was never taught it like that. I wasn't. I had the only pictures we saw were what do you call it? It was like in a doctor's office. They showed the anatomy of a female, they showed the anatomy of a male. Right. They didn't show you how to have sex. They just said through sex you got diseases, communicable diseases, syphilis, gonorrhea, the herpes, and herpes came in, I think, when I was in high school in 12th grade. And they talked about those different diseases you'd get from swapping, what do you call it, bodily fluids. Right. And that's all they would say is bodily fluids. And this was the health education class. I honestly believe, and through this town hall, and everybody should show up to this town hall if you're really debating about what's going on in the schools. Because we as parents, and now as a grandfather, we send our kids to school. We're trusting that they're giving them the tools to survive, to become productive individuals in society. They're teaching them skills, teaching them how to have sex. Right. If I want them to be taught that, I'd send them to a gigolo school.
Right, and I know I've gotten some feedback where there have been those who have said, well, I was taught the same thing in this particular curriculum when I was growing up, and they're California born and bred. But it's not the same. No. It's nowhere near the same. Because trust me, back in those days, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, there was no such thing as binary. There were no discussions about how, as a parent, we don't have the right to tell our child what their sex is. There was none of that. There were no pictures talking about homosexuals or gays or there was none of this discussion back in those days. Talking about oral sex, anal sex.
Not in school. No. We knew about it.
Right, but I'm saying, but it wasn't something that was taught in an academic curriculum. Right. It just wasn't. So, and I agree with you. For those parents in the LA Unified School District, I would strongly encourage you to show up on the 29th
On
of
the
February.
29th at 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock.
At the House of Light.
House of Light
House
Church.
of Light. You should show up because some of the information you may hear for the first time. Some of you have been given misinformation or incomplete information. And it's like I said a few moments ago, you have to know, you have to have the knowledge, and you have to be informed. And unfortunately, the school district has been reticent about releasing a lot of this information because they don't want the parents to be informed. They would prefer to keep you ignorant as to what's going on. But what I've seen, what I've heard, what some children even talked about on the prior show that they've shared with their parents is very disturbing, and it leaves them feeling very uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. And I think there are subject matters that they're presenting where they're crossing a line as far as what our parental rights are and how we choose to raise our children. And I think it's important that as a parent, step parent, foster parent, you need to show up. You need to show up.
Did you know, Ted, that in some of the schools in California now already have Planned Parenthood offices in the school? And and I didn't know this. I looked up the laws. The laws have been on the books that a 12-year-old, right, 7th grader can get an abortion or birth control pills, not during school hours, though. That's where it's changed. And so now they have Planned Parenthood offices in the schools where these counselors from Planned Parenthood will take the kid aside. That's something that is a divide of that parental control or right or inability for the parent to have a conversation with their child. Now, I've had individuals tell me, well, they have the kids that come home and they're scared to death because the parent's going to berate them. Oh, you little slut, you little whore, why'd you do this? And throw them out of the house. That might be 1/10 of 1% of the, how would you say, teenage pregnancies out there. The majority of them, they're horrified at what's going on. They break down, they end up telling their parents, and they have a huge discussion about it. Some of them do because this is the society we live in where abortion is legal, so they'll bring their own kid down because they don't want their child to be thrown out of the house. Right. They don't want them to suffer from it. The parents and the child will make a decision maybe to have the baby and give it up for adoption. My brother did. My brother had a child and with a girlfriend back when he was 17 years old, and they gave it up for adoption. My brother reconnected with him years later. I mean, my brother, I believe, was 53 years old, and his son that was given up for adoption actually was very successful. He had a construction, both of them were in construction. That's their
How
tendencies are the same. He's out
in
in Idaho, and he has a huge construction company out there, married with a wife and children, a big farm out there, and I mean, they got together, and you'd believe it, they're like two peas in a pod, and they didn't have anything to do with each other, but the decisions made, you can't create these things to look so ugly, right? That the only option is that.
Right, but I want to weigh in about Planned Parenthood, though. Yeah. I don't want Planned Parenthood to be made to be out to be a demon, because Planned Parenthood does do good in the sense that they are about women's wellness. Now the abortion piece, I'm not going anywhere near that. That's a political hot potato. But I'm not going to minimize the fact that Planned Parenthood does do women's health. Okay. And so there are young girls in the school. I would hope they talk about women's health. If the whole focus is going to be about abortion, I have a problem with that, because my position on it has always been, I don't believe that abortion should be a method of birth control.
I don't, because we're on the last few moments here. I agree to a small degree, and that is Planned Parenthood's focus is abortions, whereas there are the same kind of clinics for women's health that are pro-life. And so both of them should be given the opportunity to seek out rather than Planned Parenthood being the only one. So if you're interested in what's happening in the school, show up at the Houses of Light on February 29th at 19408 Londelia Street in Northridge. 91324 is the area code, or zip code, excuse me. Thank you for letting us come into your houses, your computers, and your homes. And Ted, bring it home.
As part of the focus of this show has always been about knowledge and information. Be informed. Because remember, ignorance prevails when rational minds sit back and do nothing. Be sure to tune in next week.
Bye-bye.
You're listening to The Voice of Reason with Mark Reed and Ted Durden, only on LA Talk Radio.